Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank you guys, all you guys for coming out to support our program on behalf of the Stony Brothers and Newton Incorporated, the NAACP. I would first of all like to foremost thank all the participants involved, particularly Professor Eduardo Mendieta of the Philosophy Department. Thank you for taking time out to moderate the program. I'd also like to thank the NAACP and the Speech and Debate Society, as well as sbu-tv for joining this program. I'd like to now welcome the president of the Speech and Debate Society, who would like to say a few words. President. So I think his name is
brings us great pleasure and great joy, as well as great honor to be part of this very important debate. We feel very privileged to be among those who bring discussion and deliberation to the campus that is known for its high cultural caliber, as well as its intriguing conversation and very important social and matters that all of us can relate to. Our very essence as a democratic nation rests on conversation and communication on very important matters. And when it comes to voting and placing our trust in the hands of one particular candidate, our civic responsibility as citizens is to be as informed as we possibly can and to get to know the viewpoints of each respective candidate so that we may know who is best qualified to lead not only us and our families and our communities, but the nation at large. And so it brings us great joy and honor as a Speech and Debate Society to work along with the elite fraternity and the NAACP, as well as the respective representatives of each candidate, to bring to you an event which we hope will convey this message and provide an outlet for everyone to understand the views at a higher level that than when they came. I'd like to thank the hardworking volunteers from the elite fraternity, as well as from the own board, as well as from the NAACP. I'd like to thank Professor Eduardo Mendieta for kindly joining us and moderating this event, as well as everyone who took the time to come and listen to the very important viewpoints that will be addressed in the discussion today. This is the first of two debates which will take place at Stony Brook University, co-hosted by Stony Brook Speech and Debate Society and the Elite Fraternity. And we hope you will join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. in the SAC auditorium as well, so that we may also be joined by Professor Eduardo Mendieta, as well as other respected faculty members from our prestigious university, in discussing these very important matters on another scale. Thank you, and I hope everyone is able to benefit optimally and to pay close attention to the words that will be said today. Thank you. I'd like to call up NAACP President Neville Hall to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone. Just to reiterate what Pascal and Rami said, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. This is a very historic event. It's important, and it's good to see all these young faces out here, knowing that this is a presidential debate coming up October 3rd, and we're just pretty much trying to set the tone for the Stony Brook students here. As president of the NAACP, since we've been in charter since 2011, we pretty much just try to emphasize different cultural and social aspects of how important it is to be active in our community and also be active in our Stony Brook community. So we hope that you enjoy this event and understand that it does not stop here. To go out to those social networks, to go out to your neighborhoods, your jobs, your clubs and organizations, and promote voting. Also, the NAACP is running a national campaign. This is My Vote campaign. You can go to thisismyvote.org to find out more about it. And also, as a chapter, we're now running our own campaign, which is a video that we started, which is on YouTube and Vimeo, so you can go ahead and check that out. And once again, thank you to the Elite Fraternity and the Speech and Debate Society, and we hope that you enjoy this historic event. Thank you.
Before I pass things on to the professor, I'd like to just introduce both sides. Representing the Democrats, we have Jen Williams. We have Sarah Ben Musa. And we have Danny Bay Walt Jr. Representing the Republicans, we have Kareem Ibrahim. And political science student Matt Harris. The way the debate will be formatted, each side will have first 3 minutes to answer the question, then 5 minutes to answer the question and review the other side, and then the person who begins will have another 2 minutes to review and make their arguments. So thank you again for coming out on behalf of the fraternity and the NAACP. We hope you enjoy the program.
Okay. Good evening. It's my honor to be here tonight and moderate this very important debate. I'm delighted to be able to read these questions. So, good evening, students and citizens. Premise. As the costs of higher education rise across the country, students face the dilemma of pursuing higher degrees while managing increasing long-term student debt. Republicans, here's the question. How should the government respond to this? Should it continue to provide more as federal funding for the pursuit of higher education?
Hello?
Hi, thank you very much for the question. First of all, as far as how our party views the issue at hand, the reality of the matter is that college debt is a very real problem in our country. And we have a college debt that has only risen and that has not done anything besides that. We have seen that college debt has risen over $1 trillion in this country. And that as we continue to subsidize these loan programs and as we continue to provide federal funding for these higher education programs, we've seen that the universities as well as the other sources for higher education that these students are attending are continuing to raise costs at an unjustified rate. There is an unprecedented increase in the cost of admission to universities, both for-profit, private, as well as other specialized schools. And the reality of the matter is that we need to put pressure on these schools. We need to make it a justified cost. We need to force affordability, and we need to make it a reality for these students to be able to attend these universities and have an education that they can afford. Because we are currently in an economy that is more demanding on our current economic system is much more demanding as far as education and much more demanding as far as what these workers that are entering the workforce need and how well equipped they must be in order to compete and bring forward something to the workplace. And the reality of the matter is that we are not preparing them adequately and affordably, and this is only compromising their interests. If we continue to press government funding for the pursuit of higher education, what we're doing is that we are hurting the students that we're trying to educate. We are simply passing along the bill to the next generation, and one that they're going to have to carry as they enter the workforce. And we're graduating students with much higher debt than they could ever expect to pay back in a reasonable amount of time, given the skill set that they've acquired from even just an undergraduate education. And such a paradigm is causing students throughout the nation to have this very real case of either not pursuing education, or pursuing it at the expense of their generation, their society as a whole. This overburdening of the students and this unjustified cost of education is really what we need to address. But at the same time, the affordability of education is something that cannot be under-addressed. And as we've seen President Obama's policy fail to do so. President Obama has,
Thank you.
pressure on colleges that are raising costs. The president has effectively demanded that they that the government will put force on these colleges to maintain the cost, or they'll lose federal funding. As of his point about not preparing students adequately enough and just not being able to provide government funding, we see that education is not a cost, it's an investment. We can't afford to be competitive in today's economy if we're not going to invest in our education and invest in having our people be higher level skills. Right now, 9.5 million students receive Pell Grants from the government. And that's only this year. These students rely on these grants from the government and will be unable to afford the schools that they go to without government help. It's needed in this workforce if we want to have any type of competition with other countries like China. Also, the 30 fastest growing occupations, more than half require higher education, and the average earnings are twice as high for college grads and high school grads. If we want more revenue and if we want to be able to pay off this debt, we need to have higher earners in our country and who are able to compete with the jobs of other countries with technology, science, and math. As for liberal arts colleges, the Republican platform has put forth that we should focus more on trade schools. And although we do appreciate trade schools, I think the liberal arts colleges teaching of critical thinking is what we need to provide higher level education to have not only employees but managers. It's the government's responsibility to level the playing field to take advantage of society's skill set. We can't have only the people who can afford college be in college. Everyone who's the best should be there representing the United States and making the money to be able to contribute to the debt through taxes and through the best jobs and be a competitive nation in this economy. So, yeah, it's more of an investment than it is a cost, and we can't afford to lose funding at this time.
Thank you very much for the Democrats for presenting their points. As far as what they're saying about how the Obama administration has demanded that there be government force put on this regulation of government costs, and how these Pell Grants, the students rely on these Pell Grants to attend these schools. And the reality of the fact is that these students are relying on grants to attend these schools because the costs are unjustified and the tuitions are far too high. These students are attending schools that are charging an unjustified cost to provide a essential skill for them to be able to have the minimal capacities to enter the workforce. We have, as the Democrats stated, we have much higher standards in this current economy for what education is sufficient to be able to have a competitive position. And we need this education to be the standard. And this education cannot be a real standard in our country if it is unattainable, if it is unaffordable, and if it comes at the expense of government subsidies to these private schools and to these for-profit universities. And as they stated that we have the revenue that's coming from these higher education positions. Our platform does not. We cannot maybe take away from the importance of higher education. We recognize the fact that you need people who are highly educated, you need skilled laborers, and you need people who are going to be going into the job force with a higher degree of education. They're going to be able to lead our country and lead us in a very global economy. But the reality of the fact is that the monetary cost of this education is not a universal standard. It is something that we must create in our country. We must have a real standard. And where you have these, third world country, the third world countries rising, as well as other global markets rising. If we are really going to compete with them, then we must have trade schools and other specialized schools at an affordable rate. And this is only going to hurt them by contributing to their debt.
Thank you.
Undergraduates also face the issue of preparing loans and the search job market. The question how should the government address this issue? Should the government use student loans forgiveness or repayment programs?
It's absolutely vital that we continue student loan forgiveness and repayment programs. As so far, the president has been fighting against raising interest rates, and since he's been in office, he's prevented the doubling of interest rates on college loans. I would like to state 3 points that he's done and will do. The pay-as-you-earn plan has the federal student loan. It caps federal student loan payments, and this is the first way to help the economy through preventing these student loans burdening our postgrads. And this cap would allow that at 10%, it would only force you to pay back 10% of your monthly discretionary income, so that people are able to afford living and able to afford new cars and be able to invest in America while paying back their student loans, so it doesn't hurt our economy that we're only paying them back. Also, the 10-year plan that affects nurses, teachers, and servicemen, which will have loans forgiven after 10 years if they're paid on time. This is extremely important to have the best of the best people in our education actually have the economic motivation to have these jobs, which are extremely necessary. The fact that teachers are paid so little and have such high student loans causes problems because the brightest in our country are not going to take these jobs that are low paying. So cutting the loans after 10 years will allow our best students to become the teachers. Also, in Mitt Romney's, in a speech, he said that students should borrow money from their parents. It's completely unable, we're completely unable to do that because 2/3 of college students take out loans. If everyone was able to borrow from their parents, they would. Or there wouldn't be so many people taking out loans. It'll allow students to put that money back in to the economy once they don't have to pay the loans anymore. And mainly we need our students to be able to have jobs and have our best people doing the things that we need most. And that's why.
Thank you again to the Democrats for their point on that matter. Regarding the question, the reality of the matter being addressed, as I stated in the previous answer, is that when we're talking about student loan forgiveness and the government addressing the fact that there are these very high student loans, this very high student loan debt, and that this debt is burdening Americans entering the workforce as well as Americans trying to achieve further education, placement, and all sorts of problems are happening once they once they leave the education system and when they're entering, anything further in their lives. The reality of the matter is that we have to address the problem at its root, and we have to address what's actually causing the problem. By creating a larger system of loan forgiveness and expanding these loan forgiveness programs, we're simply compounding the effect. We are using government subsidies to pay back this loan that was bought by the government from these institutions at a rate that is unjustified, at a cost that is not justified to begin with. we are hurting the American people. The whole point that Democrats brought up about borrowing the money from your parents and how this is an unrealistic notion. The reality of the fact is we need to make it very realistic. We need to make education an affordable thing. We need to make it so that people can pay for their own education. There doesn't need to be this standard set that there need to be these high loans, that people need to be entering these skilled labor positions that are low-paying positions, that aren't, where they're not going to have six-figure incomes. They need to be able to enter these positions with a reasonable amount of debt or none at all. They need to be able to afford those positions, because otherwise, as the Democrats stated, this is going to dissuade people from entering these positions. We're going to have low-skilled people, or people who could have been more qualified not entering these fields that are very vital. As far as the points that they made about President Obama's current success and how what he's been able to do as far as addressing the problem, preventing the interest rates from doubling and being able to cap the interest rates on current student loan debt is a very important, it was something that was very important for managing the debt of the students, currently, as well as the future student debt that's going to be accrued by students that are currently in universities. But it is not something that is going back and actually addressing the matter. Something that was done at something that's done, as we saw, at the very last minute, that is in accordance with his spending policy regulation, where it's very unregulated spending, and you don't have this bipartisan approval of how he is regulating the government spending. Currently, we have both in the Congress and in the Senate, the spending that he tried to put forward that was at a 25% of the GDP was shot down, and we saw it over and over, and where he's trying to tie in these programs that are going to help this debt repayment. We need to make them reasonable. We need to make them actually affordable for the American people and for the generation that is taking on this debt, and for the generation that is entering the workforce, as well as the generation that is coming up. We can't simply keep on passing the buck and expect it to roll over, and that these problems will go away on their own. These are real problems that need to be addressed at their root, where they're happening. As they said, there's the 10-year plan for necessary jobs. Our platform would say that this shouldn't be a necessary thing, that you shouldn't have these skilled labor positions that have low-paying incomes. They shouldn't need to have these programs in place. There shouldn't be this overburdening of debt. We should put pressure on universities to justify these costs or not have them. That people shouldn't be graduating into a workforce where they have an income that is that does not allow for repayment of loans. This should never be the case. That you should never have this perpetuation of debt and people paying. As they said, the pay-as-you-earn program that makes it so that only 10% of their discretionary spending, that is the cap as to what their payments can be. This is a very real case, but we can't do this at the administrative level. This can't be done. This can't be a policy that's put in place after the fact. This should be the fact as a result of the lower cost of education. We are putting a greater burden by doing it retroactively. We must do this proactively. We must put this proactive responsibility on the institutions that are providing the education, and this will be a true reinvestment into our economy, into creating greater revenue. Because if we create a greater variety of skilled laborers, as well as people who are attaining higher education into these positions, this is a true reinvestment. This is true human capital. Not doing it after the fact, after these private institutions, universities have capitalized upon the fact that they have any type of tuition that they want to charge. And for this reason, we thank you very much.
Thank you. Democrats. You have 2 minutes.
Well, I believe we differ in addressing the root problem, because to the Democratic side, the root of the problem is the ability to give an education for an individual. We think that that is the number one important thing for us to do, because education is what's going to make us a better country, and addressing the economic side of schools and colleges and private and state universities is going to prove to be something that needs to be fixed. But right now, student help is something that we need. You can't compromise compromise the education to nurses, servicemen, and teachers because we don't want to pay for their school and allow them to live lives and have the best people be there without having accumulating debt. We don't want to compromise that by just cutting it and hoping that something will go through by working with the schools. Some of our best and brightest are from the lowest among us, and we can't just let them be until we figure out a new plan when we could afford and we need to invest in them because they're going to make our country the best. Being unable to afford an education is should be entirely on your own, and it shouldn't be a deterrent from, like, you should be able to afford your own education, and I think that's great if you can, but if you can't, it shouldn't stop you from being educated and being able to pay back. If the thought of loans is what's going to stop you, and the inability to pay them back is going to stop people, because it can, if we don't provide any subsidies at all, there's no investment, there's no need. If people can't find jobs, they're not going to get educated, and there's not going to be any help for them. So if we help them now, it'll pay us back in the long run, and we'll be able to have a brighter future and have a more competitive nation.
Thank you. Next question. Premise. There has been a lot of controversy over the recent economic bailout, its provisions, and the actions of its beneficiaries. Question to the Republicans. Was the bailout the right course of action given the economic climate? Could it have been done differently?
Hey everybody, it's great to be here. All right, so let's get down to business. You talk about bailouts, talk about a number of different bailouts. Obviously, there was a bailout under George W. Bush. We're talking about bailing out the big banks. I'm not going to argue against that. We knew what we needed to do to prevent collapse. Okay, but you want to talk about the bailout of General Motors? That was a failure, and I'll tell you why. So. Mitt Romney had argued for allowing them to go bankrupt with a managed bankruptcy, and the administration took him up on that. That was one part of the plan. But the other plan was to dump a bunch of money into General Motors, and that wasn't right, because to dump a bunch of money in, yeah, maybe it speeds things along a little bit, but the problem is you're not addressing the heart of the issue. Okay, you're not addressing the unions that own the Democratic Party and have for quite some time. Okay, so the unions get a sweetheart of a deal, and you know, they're happy, and a couple of jobs possibly get created because of the managed bankruptcy that Mitt Romney wanted to institute. But the problem is you're still getting, let's be honest here, an inferior product, and you're paying the workers too much, and they're getting benefits that are exorbitant and huge kickbacks, and union leaders are making tons of money, and it's not addressing the real problem. So in not fundamentally restructuring the auto industry, the bailout was a failure. You want to talk about the economic stimulus under Obama? I don't think we need to mince words here. It was a failure, and I'll tell you why. Because unemployment is still above 8%, okay? The economy has not been turned around. Now, I don't know how long we're going to argue, oh, George W. Bush, it was all his fault. It's been 4 years, people, okay? Unemployment is still above 8%. What was the last jobs report? We saw 96,000 jobs. That's not even enough jobs to account for the new college graduates and people entering the workforce. And that unemployment number isn't even counting people who stopped looking for work. They've just given up. So we can argue, and I'm sure the Democrats will tell you, 30 straight months of private sector job growth. And if you start counting from this particular month, it looks great. Well, you know what? Yeah. You can't polish a turd, my friends. We can go, unemployment is still at 8% now, and that's because government cannot solve all your problems, my friend. I know the Democrats like to tell you that government, everything from, obviously the General Motors to, what your kids eat at school lunches needs to be monitored by the federal government and the food Nazis and what have you, and that's not the solution. The solution is you get government out, you get regulations and these restrictions out that are crippling small business, and that is how you allow our economy to prosper again. So yeah, I'd like to hear somebody argue that these bailouts were a success, because look at the unemployment rate.
Thank you. Democrats, you have 5 minutes.
I'd just like to start by addressing some comments that were made by the Republicans. First off, I don't think we just did what we needed to do in terms of the 07 bailout. There was not enough regulations on that bailout. We essentially just poured $700 billion in multiple corporations and told them to do what they could with it. The problem with a plan like this is it becomes impossible to trace that kind of money. Taxpayer money has been rumored to go towards jet planes, vacations to Cancun for business. Essentially, I think what distinguishes the bailouts of this administration from the ones preceding it are the amount of regulations that come with it. Because with taxpayer money, fundamentally there needs to be regulations on it. It's not their money, it is not theirs to do with it what they make. And the reason I would argue that the bailout for GM was successful was that this couple million jobs that the Republicans were arguing were created were more than 500,000 jobs. I don't know about you, but that's more than a couple in my mind. That's more growth in a decade. That's more growth than we've had in a decade, rather. In terms of the economic stimulus, yes, unemployment is still over 8%, but that has decreased since Obama has taken office, which is more of a recovery than we've seen under the Bush administration. And in terms of the recent economic reports, well, yes, it has 96,000 jobs were created this month. That was one of the first months in which we've seen less than 100,000 jobs created. While this is a lull, and it does come in a bad time in the election year, it still is growth. And it still is much better off than we were in 2007. Another point I want to make, GM's not just a business. A lot of those families were struggling, and a lot of people were going to get laid off. And now, because of Obama's administration, 500,000 people now have jobs. 500,000 people can now go to sleep at night, knowing the next morning they have somewhere to work for. In terms of essentially, our main stance is that the bailouts of this administration are much more successful than the bailouts of the previous administration because of the way they were formed. Regulations are very important. While Republicans will tell you that regulations are a hindrance on most of these bailouts, and they will refuse to spend taxpayer money with these regulations in place, we argue that, as I said before, fundamentally, it is not right to take taxpayer money, money that these people could be using, and not produce the kind of results that the Obama administration has produced. And so, again, I'd like to reiterate our main points. The GM bailout was a success. The auto industry is thriving. As we said at the DNC convention, and we'll say again, the modern is dead and GM is alive. We cannot keep treating these businesses as if they are businesses and just that. They are the whole of our nation. They are what once made our nation thriving, what once made our nation great. 500,000 jobs is not something to scoff about. And while unemployment is still not where we need it to be, it's much better off than we were 5 years ago. And that's something to deeply consider. And that's our main point.
Republicans, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, so 500,000 jobs. The question is then, for how long? How long do these people have these jobs, okay? Because the auto industry is a house of cards, okay? And so what we did is we pumped a bunch of money in there, we saved some jobs, but the question is for how long? Because the American auto industry, as it's currently structured, with the rising cost we're paying to these unions and union leaders, and the quality of the product we're pushing out is just not something that is sustainable. And as long as if Democrats want to talk about regulation and the need for financial regulation, you know what they weren't a fan of, or at least their saint Bill Clinton was not a fan of, like the Glass-Steagall Act. Okay, that kept the banks basically playing Vegas with the money that they were taking in. They kept the banks separate from these private investment and things like that. And Clinton repealed Glass-Steagall. When we talk about, you want to talk about regulation, that's fine, but let's be fair. Democrats weren't always fans of regulation. The unemployment rate is certainly not lower now than it was when we entered this economic crisis. It's still above 8%. And you know what, if you're fine with 8% unemployment, that's great, but the people who are unemployed are certainly not. And that doesn't even include people who have stopped looking. The number of people, if you want to look at the real unemployment rate, is something like 16, 17, up to, possibly up to 20%. So, and finally what I'd say is how we justify the cost. So yeah, we are, I guess, we bailed out GM, and that's great for those people at GM, but at the cost of the entire nation having to pay for it, I don't think that's right. I don't think the American people think that's right. So yeah, the unions are happy, but are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Thank you.
Thank you. Premise. The global economy has also seen its fair share of woes in recent years. However, it has also seen the rise of countries such as China, Brazil, and Turkey. Question to the Democrats. What is your party or candidate's plan on securing the status of the United States in the global economy in the face of rising third world economies such as Brazil's, China's, or Turkey's?
All right. So our plan in terms of becoming more competitive in the global market is just that. We need to focus on being competitive. The reason most of these third world countries are able to have such successes is because they recognize the economic necessity of investing in certain infrastructures and in certain systems and in certain people. Meanwhile, we're here playing politics as usual, slowly making our way into investments. If we continue on this track, we are not going to be able to sustain our stance in the global economy. What we seek to invest in is three major categories: manufacturing, education, and energy. Education, which we discussed earlier, is one of the fundamental principles of competing in a global economy. We want to invest in education and job skills, which our opponent, Romney, wants to cut. He does not want any more funding in education, which we greatly disagree with, because what is the basis of furthering technologies and furthering our country, if not education? Another thing, manufacturing. As I said before, we prevented the auto industry from failing and managed to create 500 million jobs, or 500,000 jobs. And if we go on this track, we're able to not only solidify our position as the superpower that we were and will continue to be, but we managed to double our exports, another thing Obama focuses on, and create at least 1 million manufacturing jobs. Obama promised 1 million manufacturing jobs, and he's already halfway there, and he doesn't even have a second term yet. Just remember that. Another thing, energy. We want to invest in clean energy. Since Obama has taken office, electricity generated from wind and solar sources has doubled and created 250,000 jobs, in addition to that 500 million jobs that we have in the auto industry. Under Obama, the U.S. is producing more oil than it has in the last 14 years. For some of us in this room, that's more than half of our lives. Under Obama, the U.S. has become the world leader in natural gas. So our stance for competing in this global economy is investing, because it's not just empty spending as the Republicans like to portray it as. An investment secures the results that we need to compete in this global economy. We cannot be stuck in politics anymore. We need to think about our future and the future of our children, our children's children. If we want to become a leader in this world and solidify our place, we need to invest and we need to compete. Thank you.
Those are some nice numbers there, but you know, anybody can make up statistics. 53% of people know that. But seeing that is the best joke any Republican has told in at least 5 years. Okay, yeah. So it's nice to talk about how we're going to become globally competitive with things like manufacturing. First of all, you know, talk about investments. The investments are made by private citizens. That's what the Republican Party believes is best. Is investments made by private citizens, investments made in the private sector. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about government investments because, as I stated earlier, those are paid for by you and me. And the question is, where do we stop them? So we bailed out. GM is important. It needs to be bailed out. Well, what's next? The next thing you know, we're bailing out Tiddlywinks factories because we couldn't afford to live without those jobs. It's not fixing the problem. The problem is we need private investment. We need to get government out of the way. Another reason that places like China have a trade advantage is essentially slave labor, and I don't think anybody would argue we should be going that route. In terms of energy, this president is so pro-energy that he opposed the XL pipeline that would have created many jobs, and he also opposes coal. So you want to talk about energy. What you have is a president who's turned his back on traditional sources of energy when you talk about the XL pipeline, and has tried to funnel your and my tax dollars into things like Solyndra, which went belly up. And how much do we spend on that? Half a $1 billion or something like that. So it's nice to talk about energy. It's a little inconvenient when you talk about some of the specifics of this administration. But another way that we can become competitive globally, that we can become competitive in this new global economy, is to get out there and talk with other nations, to get out there and have trade agreements. And that's something this administration has simply not done. The way to become competitive in a global economy is not to turn your back on the globe. The UN General Assembly was meeting last week in New York City, and President Obama made sure to sit down and talk with the women of the View. Okay, this is a president who had 0 bilateral meetings with the leaders of fellow nations at the UN General Assembly. And you want to talk, liberals, I'm sure, will say George W. Bush was not, connected with the world or whatever. When he was running for election in 2004, he met with the leaders of several nations. Okay, so Barack Obama gets up and makes a speech, but he doesn't actually want to sit down with world leaders. They have the telephone. But you and I both know that the way you hash out disagreements or make new agreements, sometimes just sit down over a beer or 12, and you sit down and you hash things out. And that's something this president is not willing to do, but he'll definitely sit down with Whoopi Goldberg and Barbara Walters. And he'll debate Elizabeth Hasselbeck and tell her what's up. But he's failing to meet his requirement as the leader of the free world to meet with other nations. So the question is, what's our plan? What is the Republican plan? And it's quite simple, my friends. We need to get government out of the way, okay? So the first thing that I would do is you got to get rid of this Environmental Protection Agency, okay? It's too, we talk about cap and trade and things like this, and you're really just handicapping ourselves. We're putting a blindfold on ourselves, we're tying our feet together, and then we're challenging the Chinese to a race. We're not going to win. The only way we're going to win is to get government out of the way. The other way that we win is we need skilled immigration. We want the best and the brightest to come to America. And the way that we do that is we need to enforce what we have on the books, okay? We enforce, in terms of the legal immigration, we need to enforce what we have on the books, enforce student visas, enforce visas that we have, and then we need to incentivize for private businesses to really bring the best and the brightest from other nations legally, because legal immigration is great, and that is something that we can definitely, we should definitely try to attack. So, in summary, my friends, how do we become a global leader in the global economy? Well, I've laid out a plan for you, and the president certainly does not know how to do that because, he needs another term to what? Completely destroy the economy and this nation? I don't think so, my friends. So we get government out of the way, and we allow private business to flourish. Thank you.
All right, I just want to start by talking about some of the comments that were made on this. In terms of the statistics, you can fact check them if you like. We're not like Fox News. The things we say are meant to be taken factually. Another thing about private citizens making investments, private citizens do not have that kind of capital, unless you're Mitt Romney, but in terms of our stance, the president does not support companies, solely companies that are for big oil. Our focus is on investments in clean energy, because we believe that's the future. What's the point of living in the past? What's the point of investing in things we've seen have not worked as well? We want to develop new technologies. We want to develop things that will keep us competing in the global market. And in terms of getting rid of the EPA, I mean, in terms of cost to benefit, you can compete with the global market, but what's the point if you don't have clean air or water? So, also another thing I want to address, in terms of Obama meeting with world leaders. I don't think he is against meeting with world leaders, which seems to be the angle which FACT took. But also, this question is more about competition with leading nations rather than cooperation. I don't think competition has anything to do with meeting with world leaders. I think it has more to do with our internal struggle and our internal economy. So again, I'm going to reiterate, our investments should be our main focus. Manufacturing, energy, and just kidding. Manufacturing, energy, and education.
Thank you. Premise. Some Americans are concerned that there is a rising trend of outsourcing of jobs and an increasing saturation of the job market by undocumented workers. Republicans, do you recognize the outsourcing of jobs and the oversaturation of the job market by undocumented workers as a major issue that American workers are currently facing? If so, how would you deal with this issue? If not, why?
So to begin with, the issue of outsourcing jobs as well as the oversaturation of job market by undocumented workers, what we're dealing really with is the globalization of economy. And we have these global economies, and how is the United States going to deal with the fact that we are not the only country in the world, and we are not the only ones dealing within this global economy, and that there is this very intertwined trade. What we have is that in America currently we have a failure to enforce the visas, the work visas as well as student visas that are keeping immigrants in the country, and immigrants are staying illegally. And what we're having is that we're having an increase in unskilled, an increase in illegal immigration, and this is hurting skilled immigrants that could be coming into this country legally. This is hurting the legal immigrants. In the sense that we can't continue to issue these student visas. We cannot continue to, we can't continue to issue these student visas unless the ones that are currently in place are being enforced. We can't continue to issue these work visas unless the ones that are currently in place are being enforced. We need a greater enforcement of the current system in order to allow for the system to move forward in a way that is beneficial to the American economy, where we can have these skilled laborers, where we can have these these people that are going to advance our companies, where we can have have immigrants coming into the country that can jump right into management positions, that can jump right into positions that are going to move our companies forward, that are going to, in the position that they're placed, they're going to be able to do more, work harder, that have higher degrees. We need these skilled laborers. We need to be able to bring these people into the country. And if we continue to allow the illegal immigration trend that's currently happening, and we don't shore up the borders, we're going to only hurt our ability to do this. We're going to hurt our ability to get legal immigrants that are highly skilled, as well as the ability to incentivize companies to go looking for these skilled legal immigrants. Because if you have this saturation of illegal immigrants, and where it's either you have unskilled labor or you can find skilled labor out of the country for real cheap. If we don't incentivize looking for skilled labor and bringing these legal immigrants into the country, we need skilled legal immigrants. Otherwise, why not outsource? We need to incentivize this for the companies, and we need to put this at the private sector level. We need the private sector to go out looking for skilled people in other countries. We need to find the PhDs and the people that in other countries, the MBAs. We need these people with higher degrees that are more qualified, that could bring more into our workforce and can advance our economy better. And the private sector is the one that's going to need to do this. This is going to have to be done by enforcing the government regulations on immigration and incentivizing the advancement of legal immigration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. 5 minutes.
I agree that we need those kind of workers, the PhD students, the brilliant people, the people who really work and learn. But our focus rather, is not on finding these people, but on focusing on the people in this country. And we don't need skilled legal immigrants. We need skilled legal Americans. We don't need to find these people. We need to create these people. And in that sense, a big Obama stance would be the DREAM Act. What the DREAM Act is it takes minors that have been living in the U.S. for more than 5 years and allows them to apply for temporary citizenship, temporary residency rather, if they go to a 4-year institution or serve out 2 years in the military with honorable discharge, of course. And during this time, they can qualify for permanent residency. We believe that you should take a problem and turn it into a solution. Romney's stance on illegal immigration is deportation, which alone is not enough. We cannot take children that have been living in this country for 5 years and simply deport them, when we could be taking the skill sets that they might have and turning it into something productive. We live in a country that has basic fundamental principles that we are all proud to share, I like to believe. And one of those fundamental principles is that you should not have to suffer for the actions of your parents when you, in and of yourself, did not do anything wrong. So we want to focus on taking this problem and turning it into a solution. And another part of the question focuses on outsourcing. We want to increase tax incentives for business that bring jobs back home. We want to eliminate the tax breaks for companies that outsource American jobs. Mitt Romney doesn't agree with us on that. Our focus is on creating American jobs and creating American workers, taking problems and turning them into solutions, incentivizing the private sector, rather than trying to control it. Romney's stance is also to put taxes on foreign products, thus encouraging outsourcing. I have nothing against Mitt Romney as a man, but that's just it. He's a businessman, not a politician. And America is not a business, it's a country with fundamental principles that must be adhered to. And as I said before, the DREAM Act will solidify our stance on taking problems and turning them into solutions, because that in and of itself represents the American ideal, the American dream, taking problems and forever turning them into solutions. Thank you.
Get to the fundamental question, which is what you learn from your opponent. And to the Democrats, what issue addressed tonight do you agree most with your opponents on, and why? You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. First, allow me to discuss the things on which we agree with the Mitt Romney platform on as Democrats. First and foremost is we believe in support of our allies overseas, be them Israel or any other country, And we support a strong military foundation for America in our overseas and international dealings. Right? We provide our allies with military, financial, and above all, moral support. Right? We help our allies in the tumultuous Middle East, and we help them everywhere else. Right? To get to the disagreements, of which there are many, let us first discuss the one that we feel is most important, and that is the issue of investment, whether it be investment in our financial future, investment in our education, or investment in some other area. Mitt Romney believes that government has no place in outside areas, be them companies or college, and we disagree. Everything that is great has been achieved with the help of someone else, especially if that help comes from the government and the country that is supporting you. We need to invest in young American education, and we need to make ourselves competitive on the international stage. Right? Other countries around the world subsidize their students' education, and we must do so as well. Otherwise, we are falling behind. Right? Education shouldn't exist only to create new workers. Education should exist to create better citizens, should be to create better people, and not just workers, but supervisors, bosses, the next Bill Gates. Right? As President Obama stated, no family should set aside that college acceptance letter because they believe they just can't afford it. That is not right. The best and brightest of us should be able to achieve an education that we are striving for. America is the land of opportunity, and our government must help provide that opportunity when it is not self-evident. As far as cutting the college investment or cutting subsidies of loans, if we do that and we cut what we invest, right, that only increases the cost on the individual person. Then what do? They default. And that's worse than anything other than a late payment. Not paying anything back is the worst possible thing. And allowing students to default by not subsidizing their education, by not subsidizing what they're trying to achieve. We are creating a bigger problem than what we started with. That is Obama's position against Mitt Romney. Thank you.
Let me rephrase the question. What issue addressed tonight did you most agree with your opponent on, and why?
I don't know exactly. All right, regarding the question that was asked, what we agree with our opponent on, which I think they brought up a good point about how they agree with Mitt Romney's involvement in the Middle East. I don't know if this is actually a policy in which there is any alignment in the views. However, we'll talk about what we do agree with Obama's policies on. What we do agree with, Obama's doing is that, Obama has, as far as economic regulation, there has been, under the Obama policy, under the Obama administration, that he has started the pressuring of colleges. However, while we don't agree with the manner in which they're implementing the economic regulation itself, there's very little that is very little of the two views that can be resolved, except that there is an agreement that these are problems that need to be addressed, and we agree with the Obama administration's recognition of these problems. The fact that the Obama administration has recognized the need to have, the reinvestment in these areas, and the reinvestment in areas such as energy, and reinvestment in areas such as production and manufacturing. While we don't agree with the means by which he attempts to accomplish it, in that we believe that this must be a private sector investment, it can't be a government investment. We still do agree with it because this is something that needs to be done, and this is a real problem that needs to be addressed. And the American people are going to have to answer the American government rather is going to have to answer the American people as to how, where these pressures were placed and how we allowed for these advancements to happen. And so for these reasons, we agree that, there should be pressure put on, that the college system must be reformed. We agree that there must be reinvestment in the fields of energy, manufacturing. We also agree that there needs to be an expansion of the foreign trade leaving the United States, that exporting must be very heavily stressed, that we need American products to be sold overseas, and we need American manufactured goods to be on the market in other countries, and that is the kind of trade that we need to be having. Whereas we're seeing countries such as China and Turkey and Russia, their economies are flourishing as a result of exportation, and we are not taking advantage of that. We're not stepping into the field as much as we should, given the American workforce and our human capital, as well as our economic potential. And so those are the points that we agree with our opponents on. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Should we take 2 minutes, or should we move on to the questions from the audience? Okay. Wait. How is that possible? You just spoke for.
That's what we're three.
Okay. When you spoke, right? I'm sorry.
Okay. So regarding the points that we disagree with the Obama platform on, the involvement in the Middle East and the involvement in foreign nations, the Democratic platform would like to state that this is something that that Obama is that this is something he's very concerned about, and this is one of his priorities, and this is something that needs to be addressed, and the military presence. But the reality of the fact is that we disagree with the fact that Obama's been a very fair weather friend to Israel, and Israel is our main ally in the Middle East, and it is the only real democratic stronghold in a very turbulent region of the world. It is the only one that is it's a fundamental ally of the United States, and its interests must be protected for United States interests in the region to be protected. And the fact that we have been fair weather friends to Israel, that we haven't had any resistance to the pressure from Egypt and Turkey, that we haven't had any, that we haven't shown sort of the United States backbone in the region. We've been very standoffish, almost as if, that the further we pull ourselves out of the situation, the more it'll stabilize itself, and the more people will just remember American allegiance to the region. This is not the case. We need a military presence in the region. We need to have more, naval exercises in the, in the region to show, to remind Iran and Turkey and all of the other countries that are, that are currently destabilizing, against the interests of the United States, that we are a very strong presence there, and that our interest there is very important. As well as the fact that investment must be done by the private sector. What have we seen that happens at an expedited rate by the government in anything? If we believe that investment is going to happen by the government at a rate that's going to facilitate growth, that's going to foster, this advancement of technology or advancement of, utilization of resources, this is a very misguided notion, and one that cannot be, it can't be corroborated by any factual evidence. And for this reason, we disagree with their stance on that. And let's see what they say.
Thank you. So there are some excellent questions from the audience, and I can only read 2 of them. The Democrats first, 2 minutes, right? Okay, 2 minutes and then 2 minutes.
First and foremost, allow me to apologize for asking the question in the first place. Now to address what my opponent said. Right? As far as on what he agreed with us, that we need to increase exports. Absolutely. And exports have increased under Obama. 500,000 manufacturing jobs have been brought back to the U.S. from outside, or back from China, brought back from Brazil. And the increase in those jobs has increased our exports. GM is exporting at a higher rate than they ever had in their entire history, thanks to Obama's reinvestment in them. And as far as international aid to Israel, first of all, let us say that Obama has been a bigger friend of Israel than anybody in any previous administration. And let me illustrate that. First of all, for the fiscal year 2013, which begins this month, Obama has pledged $3.1 billion to Israel in foreign aid. That $3.1 billion is not just the biggest amount of money we've ever given to Israel, it is the biggest amount of money the U.S. has given to any country ever in our history. And that is just this year alone. In the past 3 years of Obama's administration, we have given them $10 billion in aid, 1/5 of their entire defense budget during that time. Right? If anybody is a bigger friend to Israel than the U.S., we don't know it. Right? In addition to what we provide them with technology, joint training exercises, and covert operations, such as the Stuxnet computer virus. Right? In addition to our Middle Eastern power, you will remember that Libya and Gaddafi were removed from power, right, without a single loss of an American military life. Not one. That is a foreign policy victory in any book, written by anyone. To say that we are weak in the Middle East is to ignore 3 years of history. And that's all we have to say about that issue. Thank you.
Now, to take the questions from the audience, the first one goes to the Republicans, and then the Democrats will have 2 minutes to reply as well. The U.S. national debt is now about $16 trillion. What is your stance on this national challenge, and what is your plan to pay this off if it is mathematically possible?
So this question brings up a very important point. The United States national debt, being as high as it is, the Romney campaign, what we plan to do is we plan to create a realistic spending to GDP ratio that's going to allow us to shore up the loose ends of where we need to create stimulus, where we need to create economic progress, and to not take away so much from the actual capital that the government has to play with. Currently, under the Obama administration, we've seen an unprecedented rise to a ratio of 25%, where our spending is 25% of our GDP. And we believe that this is an unrealistic ratio, that we cannot continue, we can't keep this trend going. And this isn't something that's mathematically possible. This isn't something that, looking forward in projections for, where this is going to take our nation, that we can expect to be, a realistic solution. We believe that the solution is going to have to start with adjusting how that spending can be, in proportion to what the GDP actually is. We believe that programs such as incentivization for, private business in the private sector to actually reinvest, we need incentivization because that is the spirit of Americanism. Allowing these businesses that are creating economic stimulus at a much faster rate than the government ever could, that are doing it at the level of individual jobs, that are doing it at the level of manufacturing, competition, all of these things. We need to incentivize these industries, and we need to take the burdens away from them that were imposed by this administration and that are continually hindering the progression of the private sector. We need to sort of take away that government regulation, not so much in the sense of regulating their actions, but in that when the government is involved in every one of the affairs of these private sector corporations, we're compromising their ability to move forward. And so that is how we plan to address the issue of that. Thank you very much.
Addressing the issues of national debt is vitally important to our country and to the Obama administration. First, let us state that every president in American history since FDR has dealt with a debt problem in their administration, all except for President Bill Clinton. Right? Obama has added in his 4 years $1.3 trillion to that $16 trillion debt. Right? Bush started off his administration with an economic surplus, where we were in the green, right? By waging 2 unfunded wars on borrowed money, right? In addition to the Bush tax cuts for people who make over $250,000 a year, he has spiraled us into debt by cutting revenue and without increasing taxes. He cut revenue, waged wars, and spent money we did not have. That is what contributed to the surplus. Contributed to the debt. As for getting rid of the debt on the Obama side, we are giving tax incentives to companies that insource, companies that bring jobs back that can be taxed. They are getting tax breaks. That is bringing jobs, which is bringing revenue, which is bringing payroll taxes, income taxes, and manufacturing taxes, right? All of these increasing revenue to bring down our debt. Additionally, we are going to eliminate tax breaks for companies that outsource, so that we are getting more revenue from companies if they so decide to leave. That way, they don't just leave and take all their money with them. We are getting some of what we put into it back. And that is important for lowering our debt. These are the plans that the Obama administration wants to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you. The next and last question from the Republicans. Mitt Romney proposes the same things that Bush did during his 2 terms, like giving tax cuts to the rich so that they could put money into the economy. That did not work then. How will it work now?
The liberal bias of the question here is astounding. So the question I would ask back is, what has Barack Obama done to show that his policies are working? Okay, really, do you like unemployment above 8%? Do you like that? Do you like the fact that we can't even create more jobs right now, enough jobs to account for the new students coming out of the workforce? Right? You know what, if you shut the hell up, that'd be very...
Can you please be respectful?
Yeah, you know what, I'll be respectful when I get respect. So don't, when the audience stops talking, then I will address the point. Again, the point is, these aren't the same policies as George W. Bush. George W. Bush was not a real conservative. We're not talking about, we're not talking about this compassionate conservatism of these economic plans of, it's time for a reality check, okay? We're not talking about the same plans. We're not talking about 2 wars in the Middle East, okay? We're talking about potentially 1. But we're not talking about the same things George W. Bush was talking about. And we're talking about economic growth. We're talking about cutting regulation, even more so. Yeah, all the other thing you gotta understand here is the economy it ebbs and flows, okay? Presidents do not have unilateral control over the economy. But they do have control over, you know what, this is really difficult for me to, George Bush, we're not gonna wage wars in the Middle East, okay? It's just not gonna happen. We're not gonna go chasing these bad guys. And we're gonna have real economic reform, conservative reform. Thank you.
Right. I want to just address some points that I thought my opponent was correct on. First off, I would agree that a lot of Romney's policies do not reflect George Bush's policies. They do reflect, in fact, Obama's policies. Romney cared for one, that's one thing. And you are right, we're not talking about 2 wars because Obama ended them. In we've been saying all along. We need to incentivize the private sector to insource. And we also need to put investments in education, manufacturing, and energy. Part of the reason that I think the Obama administration has been more successful than the preceding administration is that they focused on regulating plans that they put forth, and they focused on investments rather than just throwing money at corporations. We've seen time and time and again that trickle-down economics do not work. It is an economic fallacy to say that they do, and that's not politics, that's math. Trickle-down economics are based on a bias towards corporations, which we do not believe are people. Corporations are corporations, and that's that. So our stance on the economy is that we would like to stray from the policies put forth by the administration that came before us, the administration that plunged us into a recession. And yes, as I said, 8% is not where we'd like to stop, but it's lower than we started with, and that's the important part. Another important part is that we're creating jobs. Job loss was at an all-time high when Obama took office, and now we can say that we finally started to produce growth, and we start to get our feet on the ground again. And that's the most important part. Yes, 4 years is not enough to get us where we need to be, which is why I propose that we take the progress we've taken from this 4 years and go for another 4. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap things up, I'd just like to say that the Belief in Turning Incorporated also is the acronym that stands for Manhood, Achievement, Leadership, Integrity, and Knowledge. So keeping with the fourth principle, we actually have fact checkers who have been listening to the debate the whole time and making sure that everything is said of the highest integrity. So I would like to give the microphone to them in order for them to introduce themselves and talk about a few of the things that they, inconsistencies that they noticed during the debate.
Hello, my name is Untitled Jr. I'm researching the facts. From what I've seen so far, you couldn't find the cost, whether or not the cost of admission has risen at an unprecedented rate. And this was a point made by the Republicans.
We also found in a number of articles that said that the 10-year plan that will after 10 years revision. Hello? All right. After the 10-year plan that's supposed to be after 10 years of paid revision, we found that it said after 25 years, not after, in a number of articles. That was a point made by the Democrats. We also did find two-thirds, that was also said by the Democrats, two-thirds of households without loans and are able to borrow from parents.
And the point made by the Republicans spending by Obama put forth 5% of the GDP was shot down. We couldn't find clear information on that.
Okay, so starting with question 3, a lot of statistics were thrown out regarding unemployment. So what we found by the Republicans, unemployment is still above 8%. That is correct. Unemployment, the latest count in August was 8.1%. Later on, it was also said that unemployment is better than it was 5 years ago by the Democrats. That technically is not true. In 2007, it was 4.6%, and in 2008, it was 5.8%.
But by the end of 2008, it rose to about 7.3%. The point that the Democrats made about the 2007 bailout $700 billion into a couple of companies. It was 926 recipients exactly. So in terms of that was increased. We couldn't, the point being by the Republicans that the rising cost of paying tuition and paying the union leaders, we couldn't find facts about that.
Okay, and question 4 regarding securing the status of the USA and global economy. Actually, most of these facts look pretty valid as per your Democrat. Romney wants to cut education and job skills. We found evidence of that. Obama promised 1 million manufacturing jobs. He's already created half of them. That is good. It's a little bit above 500,000 created. I forget the exact number. The U.S. is producing more oil than it has in the last 14 years. We actually couldn't find that, though. We were able to find that the U.S. is now the world leader in natural gas.
Question 5, concerning outsourcing of jobs and undocumented workers. The point that the Democrats made that Romney wants to put taxes on foreign products is questionable. We couldn't find exact information on that. And question 6, during the agreement section, that includes most of the facts that were brought up. Everything else, for the most part, was factual.
Professor, would you like to say anything before we wrap things up?
I wasn't expecting that I would be asked.
No,
I would say that it's wonderful that you guys have kept so well informed about what's going on in the country, and it's really a pleasure to see you take each other seriously and think about these very important issues of the future of our democracy. So democracy remains alive so long as we engage in mutual debate respectfully.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Again, I'd like to thank the members of the NAACP and the Steve's Speech and Debate Society. And on behalf of the Stony Brook, I thank you for coming out. I hope you have a great night.